Hey y'all, welcome back to Mum. I'm Ellen Wong, your host. Today I'm introducing a really dear soul named Laura Miner, who is an end of life doula, an educator, and she's had over 20 years of experience working in hospice. I'm excited about this conversation to bring it out into the world because Laura has created this course that is 7 weeks long, that is essentially a death doula training course. But I really appreciate the way that she talks about this kind of work. Where she takes it also into the spiritual realm. And so she's essentially created a space where people could really talk about their views of what happens after we die, their perspectives. And I think this is really important because I think none of us really know what happens. So, in essence, there's really no experts on death. But I really appreciate the way Laura approaches her training so that it gives those who take her course this opportunity to really talk a little bit about what it is that they believe and what they've seen, what they've experienced, what they've felt. So, with every episode, I always want to invite us to start in a grounded place. So, if you're in a place where you can close your eyes, go ahead and do so. And we're just going to take a deep breath in through the nose and gently sigh that breath out. It's my honor to introduce Laura. It's such a joy to be here with you and to be opening up this container to really share about our experiences as death workers and to really hear about your journey as a death worker, as a death doula, and also what you're building, what you're creating in terms of education in this space. I feel like I've been really looking forward to this because even in our first conversation, there was just so much medicine that you shared with me. And so I find that every single one of these conversations, it's really kind of selfishly for me to kind of grow and receive. But I'm just
Yeah.
deeply grateful.
Oh, I feel the same way. And the rain has just now started. So it's starting to come down. You can still hear me okay? Because I'm in this kind of indoor outdoor place. Okay,
Yes,
good. Good,
absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
It feels good.
I'm getting kind of like chills in my body even as we're beginning to open up and speak and the rain's coming and yeah, even last night
Awesome.
I was guiding a medicine journey, my monthly medicine journey, and for whatever reason I felt called to bring in tracks of I usually end with a sound bath, but this time it was with rain on the ocean. And so just speaking to you
Um,
today, it just feels very like, okay, there's a through line here of cleansing and releasing and yeah, feels really
mm,
good.
mm, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to just open up and maybe even hear a little bit about how you came into this work. And I always find that usually there is a really profound death that we experience in our lives that proceed or bring us into this calling. So I'm really
Mm,
curious. I think when we spoke, you talked a little bit about your mother, but I'm
mm,
curious wherever you'd like to begin. Yeah, what brought you
mm.
into becoming a death doula?
Yeah, it was definitely my mom. And I was 19, so this was 27 years ago that she came, she was diagnosed with end stage ovarian cancer. And I was just finishing up my first year of college and being away from home out of state. So, just trying to kind of figure out what it was to be away from mom and dad from home and buying my own toilet paper and things like that. And and so yeah, I went home back home to Albuquerque and cared for her for a good 4 months. It was a fairly quick death, and that was partially her choice was to not do chemo or radiation. So
Mm,
she just wasn't having it. She was always into very holistic medicine, and she just didn't want that kind of she didn't see that view that as medicine for her body. So she was working with a macrobiotic diet. We were working with those kinds of things, and very much with nutrition, to see if we could, you know, fend off the cancer. But it was pretty far along. And so that experience, it was agonizing. I was definitely the, just an emotional wreck to find out that's what we were dealing with. And then really stepped up, to be there at the bedside. And I also was very fortunate to have an adult around me, one who looked me in the eye and said, I think it's time for hospice. So when we had hospice care come into our home,
Mm-hmm.
that was a game changer for me, because
When
now
did when did hospice come in? How far along
yeah,
was she? Yeah.
it was about a month before she died.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, now that I've worked in hospice, I realized that was fairly early on, but in terms of what hospice could offer and developing a therapeutic relationship with patients, it would have been even better if we had gotten her on sooner. But
Mm-hmm.
it was a pretty good opportunity for us to get some help. And um, yeah, I don't know if you want me to talk about the actual death. The actual death was, I mean, the build up to it was just so emotional and severe. And, my world was shattered.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're having to do the caregiving tasks, the day to day, as a body shuts down. So I was exhausted. It was like running a couple marathons. Maybe I've never ran a marathon, but that's how I felt. I had no idea I had that much energy in me, to lift her from the bed to the bedside commode, bathe her, things like that. And just, day after day of that, and trying to keep her comfortable and out of pain. It's exhausting when, as a caregiver, anybody who's done caregiving, it's just your whole focus is on that body and human and well-being of that other person. And so all that happened. And then towards the end, like the last couple days and the day and the moment of her death, just it was like it just made it all worth it for me. It was just one of the most beautiful spiritual experiences I've ever witnessed, was her liberating from that body that was not serving her anymore. That was, um, it was just, yeah, it was just an incredible finish. It's always hard for me to put it into words, but it definitely influenced me for the rest of my life. I think a couple of things that come to mind as I'm talking to you that I might share is just, um, she had been in a lot of pain, so she had this consistent grimace on her face. And she was someone who wasn't wanting to talk about the fact that she was dying, and that
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
She just didn't want to communicate about, and not, definitely not to her 19-year-old daughter, even though
Mm-hmm.
we all knew that's what was happening. And then I had an uncle who was in hospice volunteering, and he came over, and I kind of eavesdropped while he was talking to her, and he said, "Are you ready to?" Or no, he said, "Are you ready to die, Lino?" Her name was Lenore, Hispanic family, and he called her Lino. "Are you ready to die, Lino?" And I was like shocked that he even said that, because she hadn't wanted to talk about it at all. Um and I heard her say yes.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that really shifted. I was like, oh, okay. So we're aware, we're doing this. And pretty soon after that, she went into this kind of sleep coma like state that's common. And she couldn't communicate. She just didn't have the energy. She could, eyes were closed. It was like she was sleeping. And yet you're kind of aware that they're aware. It was like
Mm-hmm.
we kind of knew she could tell what was going on. And then one by one, within those 48 hours, just all the right people, the perfect people that she needed to see came and visited her. And by the last day, which you don't know it's the person's last day, just, but my grandma had been there. My brother had been to visit and left. My dad had gone to bed, and um, I was just in there. At that point, I had started sleeping separate because she was content. There was a lot of restlessness before up to that point, so I'd sleep next to her. But at that point, I was sleeping in my own bed. So I was about to leave for the night, and I was saying my goodnights and my and something after now hearing her say that to my uncle, I was like, Mom, I just felt like I was able to speak more candidly. Plus, she couldn't respond, so I guess she was at my mercy. So, I just some stuff came out that I'm so glad it did. Um, thank you, Mom. You've done a great job. Alan and I, that's my brother. Alan and I are going to be all right. You know, we're going to make it through this. And, just I love you. Just saying the things I needed to say. And at that time, she and I fought so much that like she was kind of a personality that in some ways it was like a love-hate
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm,
my life.
mm-hmm.
So I was really glad that that came out later, not
Yeah.
not knowing that was one of my final moments with her. And so I kind of went in to say goodnight, kind of do a hug, and then she let out this groan, and or just not even a groan, it was just like a "Mm." And like she had not communicated with us for 2 days. So it was kind of like, oh, what's going on? So I immediately was like, okay, not leaving the room yet. And it's just sort of like just intuition sometimes in these important moments can kick in, thank God. And so it was just like, oh, I think this might be something's happening here. And then the breathing started to slow and happen, and actually fairly quickly with her. She went, and her body grew cold right away. That's now that I've been with dying people, that's not always the case, but hers was like whoosh, like it was just like it was quick.
Instant. Wow.
Yeah. And the energy in the room was so special. It was just, I'm not a person who's very sensitive to energies, but I just, it was like ecstatic. Like
Wow.
I was like elated, like just so soft and loving, but like energizing. And yeah, that's the thing. I wish so much I could put that into words, but it's more a feeling, and it's just it was so powerful. It was just such a culmination to such a difficult experience. And I just knew she had gone, and I was touching her. I think I had either my hand on her cheek or maybe my cheek was on her cheek. It was just like, and then I felt the cold, and then I felt the energy, and I was just like,
Wow.
and I'd been really grappling with like the divine. What is all this? Where's she going? I was writing a lot while she was dying. Like, is this one lifetime? Is this multiple reincarnation? Is there a God even? Just really like, what the heck? Like that a lot of people do when someone's dying or you're dying yourself. Just a
Mm-hmm.
lot of spiritual questions. And that is what that experience did for me, was I just never doubted that God was there and very involved and very, very much interwoven in each of us. And I just didn't feel like she died. She was liberated from this
Mm-hmm.
body. It just did not feel like anything died. Like
Yeah.
if
It was
anything,
a transcendence. It was like the way you're describing it, it feels like you witnessed a miracle. Like there's a wonder or wondrous quality about the feeling or yeah, the ineffable sort of like feeling of it's like a mystical moment.
ineffable. I love that word. That's
Yeah.
totally what it was. That's that whole can't explain it. I can't really get the words on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just it was changed forever. And my dad had gone to bed. So and I remember thinking like, oh, I wish he could be here. It's happening. But I didn't want to leave and miss it. And so I just, after she died, I went in and got him from the room. And my immediate thing, I explained it to friends. Like I just felt like I was like dancing to go get him.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
just was like, and I love dancing anyway. That's how I express myself. So it was just like, I was like, dang, it's like she did it that was my words. She did it. Like it was a big like feat. Like, it was like this big feat to let go of this body she'd been in for 54 years. Like it very much reminds me of like a, we might have talked about this the first time we talked, like a birth. It's just
Yeah.
like we're stoked when someone like the baby comes. It was that kind of feeling. Like, and that didn't last. I went through so much grief. There was so much complex. complicated grief with this death that would probably take us 3 podcasts to talk about all of it. But at that moment, I was definitely changed forever. And so uh, just shifted my viewpoint about death and um, life and that I started reading like an aunt one of my aunts gave me a book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and as I was reading I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is what I do in life. Like I work, I'm a death worker, I'm going to be doing this. Like I just knew it,
Wow.
like
Wow. I love that you named the feeling of celebration that came when her spirit finally was able to let go of the body, and the words like she did it. I'm curious if you felt that way because you were there, you had a front row seat to what could I can imagine was really painful to watch, the deterioration and just the pain that your mother was in also, that there's almost this like relief that comes when this spirit finally separates from the body and is, let go and released finally.
that's a big part of it. That grimace like just totally smoothed out. Her face was just like, it was like a little half smile. I've heard this from other people that their loved ones. Sometimes that happens. She was a very
Wow.
spiritual woman, and I just think she was connected very deeply to something, and she just was, and she did not have that, while she was alive. Sometimes she was very angry.
It's like peace. Finally, like just
Yeah.
peace. I'm
Yeah.
also I'm really curious too. Was it difficult for your family to honor what she wanted to do for her plan, like her holistic plan? Was it something that there was internal struggle, or was it everybody was like on board right away?
It's a great question. I don't think any of us were on board, but my mom was not to be argued with. She was that kind of person. She was the boss. So it was like, if you can't argue with her, if this is what she's deciding, we just knew we had to go along with it. And
Mhm.
I'd also had done some research at school. I went to the library when I was away before I got home, and had read like some stuff with ovarian, like percentages. My analytical brain was like, oh, she really doesn't have that at this point. She doesn't have that high a chance of, it would just kind of prolong things. So I kind of knew that. Um, but yeah, it was, and I think I'd also been told by someone, a very important part is having agency, and like
Mhm.
you, a person making choices. There's more of a chance of someone having. I mean, we were still hoping for, spontaneous healing.
Yeah.
And so I felt like she might actually have more chance of that if she was doing what she wanted to do, because she was really anti like big pharma anything all our
Mhm.
lives. Like we grew up taking vitamins and she did yoga, she was very like ahead of her time health wise, like, but just not into like medicine. So it was kind of like, okay, we get it. That's
Yeah.
not her way. That wouldn't be her
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I love hearing that because I can imagine how difficult that is sometimes, the struggle between the curative approach versus, and I think what she was doing is still curative, but it's a different approach to it. And I find that there's always some, you know, um, struggle or resistance when not everybody's on board for the plan, the curative plan that a patient or a person wants to kind of go through. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing that's striking me about this experience too, um, is just the moment at which she was able to let go, the permission, and even in your uncle's question, "Are you ready to die?" To me, what it sounds like is almost the directness of that question gave her permission to begin the letting go and releasing process. Is that how you feel as well?
Yeah. And that uncle, I probably should reach out to him again. I hope he knows. Like, it was such an influence. Like, and he
Mm.
hadn't necessarily been there during all the care, but that moment to have someone that's pretty important. And I now know that, having done this work as a career, it's pretty important that permission you bring up, like,
Mm,
and that direct, like we know what's going on here and it's okay. We're going to be okay.
mm,
It's not easy, but a lot of people need that permission to
yeah,
let go.
yeah.
Yeah.
And to know that they their body knows what to do, like that it's a natural process and their body's gonna do exactly what is needed. And yeah, I find that so beautiful because, even when my father was dying, I think, it's really interesting because the whole day was such a blur in the hospital. And it's only in the last week, I want to say it was actually after our first conversation, I had this like memory just resurface where that day as he was actively dying and the doctors were trying to revive him with a paddle, and after a moment I heard my mother in the hospital room, like it was like we were in the room just outside where we could see through a window what was happening, but we weren't actually in the space because there was so much commotion. So my brother and I, were kind of outside of it, but I was watching and I saw my mom tell the doctors to stop trying. And then I saw her, kind of whispering to my dad, like holding, kind of hugging him one last time and holding him. And I remember, it's weird because I don't know if this is like a created memory, but I actually feel like this actually happened. And it's something that is resurfacing in me. I heard her give him permission, like, you can let go now, in Chinese, but it's okay, and just saying her goodbyes. And then that's actually when his spirit left, or was able to be released. And so I don't know why this is such an important point today as we're talking, but it feels like the permission is such a big piece um, of this process of just walking with somebody through their literal end of life.
I think it's huge. And I'm glad you're bringing it up and accentuating that point because um, there's so much focus. We could go on and on about like the denial of
Hmm.
death in our culture. And there's just so much focus of like survival, get them better if they have an illness, fight the illness if they have an illness. That's just so the focus. And it was with my mom. If your dad, your dad was in a medical institution, a setting,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's what they're doing. They're looking to keep this person alive.
Hmm.
And um, I mean, the whole focus up till I heard my uncle ask that question was this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. How
It's
do
a
we get
feeling,
better? Yeah.
yeah, it's just this kind of, yeah, and it's so no judgment. I think that's just the nature of a living being is to live.
Yeah.
So I have less judgment towards that these days. I used to be really frustrated by that, but come on, that's just instinct. It's instinct is to stay alive.
Mm.
So,
Hmm.
but we also have something really profound inside of us, like that came through your mom, quite possibly, that was like, oh, wait a second. This is a key moment, and this form, as I know this life to be, is ending.
Hmm.
So let's let's do something. Let's say something. And I do think that's so profoundly important for a person who is dying to hear that and to because that is very much what keeps people tied to this, what the identifications and the relationships and the everything we've created as our life. Um,
Hmm.
that is what keeps us going. I mean, that's what keeps us getting up in the morning and so then when all of that is being, cut, um, those key relationships, your daughter, your wife, so you need to know that, okay, that's wow, okay, this person, if they're saying it's okay, or at least no longer denying that this is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then I do think it brings some ease and some peace to the let go. And everyone, it's always different. Every death is different. Every
Yeah.
Just as unique as we are.
Do you see that a lot in your hospice work? That the resistance of family beloved ones to let go and the how do I even want to say it? It's almost kind of like the resistance to it. Because I find that sometimes the dying process, like the person who's dying, they may be resisting it quite a bit too, which I have seen as well. But it feels to me, and I might be very wrong about this, but it feels to me like most of the resistance actually is coming from outside of the dying person, from the people around, the loved ones who are not ready to say goodbye and want them to fight and to stay and things not to change.
I think that's true. And I've also seen it in the dying person as well. But probably, yeah, and I don't know percentages. Is it mostly from the people losing someone or is it mostly from someone dying? But there's just so many varied reactions to it. And I've heard the statement that people die the way they lived. And to some
Mm-hmm.
degree, I think that's true. I've seen that to be true. And um, I mean, it just in the broad sense that like if someone's a fighter and a,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, that kind of personality, then they're kind of gonna have that towards their death. If someone's, a little bit more flexible, adaptable, and I don't even know if that's really what I wanted to get at, but it's like,
That makes sense.
and you
Yeah.
asked the question, resistance. The resistance is huge with family members, just like with like siblings in families, you see that like siblings kind of take like they'll tend to take the opposite side of the compass, the spectrum in
Mm-hmm.
personalities and behaviors. Same thing. There's almost always one, maybe more family member who's just not on board. There's almost always one, maybe more family members who's doing everything they can to support and advocating for this is what's happening. Let's do what we can. Um, but there again, too, each family is as unique too as each person. So I've seen a lot of different situations.
How do you
Yeah,
navigate that as a death doula when you're working with somebody?
yeah. I have always seen my major role as an advocate for the person who is dying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of like but that's me personally. My purpose, like, is like this advocate, and I just have so much empathy for like this is freaking hard. Like anytime you go
Yeah.
through a huge transition in life, and I've been through many, and that's what a friend deemed me. She's like, you help people in transition. That's just what you do, That's your role, that's your purpose. And it's true. And that's the ultimate transition is leaving
Mm-hmm.
your body. So I just have that's when I get fierce. I'm not always a very fierce person, but when I'm um at a bedside with someone who's dying and been hired especially to be that advocate for them, it's like free hall pass, you're you're doing the hardest work right now, like just like you would feel towards a birthing mother. It's like, what do you
Yeah.
need? What do you need?
Yeah.
How can we serve you? And how can we make this all? But on the other hand, it's also having been the daughter who lost a mom and having lost other people who have died as well, I know how less severe and intense the situation can be if you're involved, if you're there, if there is a little bit more surrender to it than resistance. I
Mm-hmm.
I I don't have a graph or like I haven't done a study or percentages, but I just feel like in general people's grief is less severe when there's
Mm.
they're less resistant to it. So I guess that's my other role, is just getting people like uh involved and aware and kind of waking up to the fact that this might be your final moments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
let's do, let's make it the most loving we can, most meaningful we can. If this is your last moment with this human in your life that has been such a part of your life, is so a part of you and will be after they die, but in a totally different form. Um, so I think you asked what's my role? Is that what the original question was?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. It's mainly, first and foremost, I feel like I'm an advocate for the person who's going through this huge transition, but then the witnesses to that huge transition, it's changing their life too. It's life altering for them too. So they're second, close second.
Yeah. Well, there's something that I really appreciate you bringing into this work that I I think every death doula, every death worker is different, obviously. Um, and they bring their perspectives and their human into the space, their humanity into the space, into their work. Which means that they bring their beliefs and things into the work as well. And while I think even in my training, we're sort of taught to not put our beliefs into the space. I also, as somebody who has not actually actively walked with somebody through their physical end of life, I I personally can't imagine not bringing my spirituality into my work. And so there's something that I really appreciate about you and even the training, the education course that you're putting together to train people in end of life care and death doula work. There's a spiritual component to that I'm really curious about, and would love to kind of dive into and hear your perspective on why that's an important piece for you to also bring into this space and into this work.
Yeah, it can be like, an area of trepidation to talk about like what your beliefs are, spirit or God or any of it. And yet it's such a big part that comes in um anytime someone's dying. So it, yeah, it's something I start out at every situation, whether I'm working with someone at the bedside or one-on-one in coaching process or teaching this course, is like we just respect all beliefs. We just respect it. And I really think people can feel that even if you have strong spiritual beliefs that you bring with you. I think people really can absorb the fact that you're you're cool with what their beliefs are. And I think of us all as like different wavelengths or vibrations or frequencies. And so, I mean, it's such an intimate thing to be with someone at
Yeah.
at their deathbed. I mean, it's just the ultimate
The
intimacy.
ultimate intimacy. Yeah, 100%.
Keep using that word ultimate. And so I think there's just such a almost like a soul contract or something. I don't even know what that means, but like some sort of agreement like
Mhm.
has been made, and it just feels beyond us. And it's just sort of like this, which when you're with a number of deaths, you see the orchestration that
Mhm.
that built up to this. It's just such a sacred time. Um and you can kind of sense that like, oh, this was kind of mm, this was kind of decided that like and I bring up vibration and frequencies because I think we would kind of like we would attract the right frequency at such a powerful, it's the culmination of this lifetime,
Yeah.
it's such a powerful moment that I feel like you can trust in that, like and that's something I talk about in the classes. You can trust that if it's not met with as much resistance, like the right people are going to come in that will jive with what you need and what you believe and what you um sense
Mm.
is the truth of what, your existence and where you're headed. And so I don't ever worry too much these days about talking about my beliefs. I just kind of have more trust that I'm led to people who have a similar view. And if they don't, I mean, I've had people in my class who have very different beliefs. It's still fine because it's just such a universal experience. It works out fine. Like atheists have done my class, One woman gave me the feedback after she had done a 6-month program with me that because she was very her belief system was of Christianity, and I'm not talking too much about Jesus in my course, and so she let me know, that was a little bit that was different for me, mainly when we were doing group discussions and other people weren't bringing that in because that's such an important component for her.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little bit challenging, but it went fine. It just there's kind of like uh these levels of respect I think we can give each other that it's such a human because this experience, the death experience, is like so what makes us to me it's such an aspect of what makes us human that we can connect on it no matter what our beliefs are. There's like a common ground that we could connect in it.
Mm-hmm. I really, really appreciate that. It's because to me, it's like how can you not ask these questions, or how can you not, it's yes, it's on one part being that fierce advocate for the dying person in terms of the care that they're getting, and yet as you're being invited into this space, it brings up so much, and that I just feel like I'm curious how you maybe we can kind of get into the specifics of the course. I'm curious how that component of the course comes through, and what questions you're asking, and what your students are reflecting on when it comes to spirituality in within the work of death work.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I like going in this direction because it's like it is such an important part of being present at someone's last moments and prepping for that and being prepared. It is such a huge part. And um it's that whole thing like we assume a lot, especially with family members. We think that we all believe similarly. I mean, maybe it's blatantly obvious in with certain family members that okay, we look at this entirely differently. But um it's like that with end of life care wishes, like how someone wants their end of life to go, if they want to be resuscitated, if they want artificial nutrition or hydration or not. You think you know what your loved one wants because might have a really strong desire of what you want. And so you just assume, this is a person that I'm so close to. Of course, there's an assumption a lot of times that, well, of course
Yeah.
they would too. I've seen it with married couples. Like when I was teaching advanced care planning class and when I was working for hospice was like a married couple of like 50 years assuming, and then you see them realize that one wants you to do all the stops, all the medicine, all the CPR, everything, and the other one's like, oh heck no, like I don't want that. Like, and they're surprised that they want different things. So until you get curious, so that's a big part of what's happening in the class. I'm asking people questions and we're getting to hear, I think important part of it is we're getting to hear what other people's takes are on it.
Mm,
Um, and that's part of the learning is just as a death doula, you're gonna meet very different, even though I say like vibrations attract, you're gonna meet very different takes on this. So it's very good practice in a course when you're in this group setting to kind of we're not fixing, we're not advising, I'm not advising or fixing anybody, and I don't need to because I don't know what's best for them. They know what's best for them and their loved one who might be dying, or if they're getting into some students come to this course wanting to do the work and get into like as a death doula. So it's very good practice to just be open mind, open heart to whatever somebody views this as and what their desire is at end of life. Or um it's a lot of it is curiosity around this that we haven't been allowed to do because nobody wants to talk about death. Everybody kind of is awful at bringing it up and it's a taboo topic. And so it's practice at that, like, and it's a practice to see how differently we do look at it. And one of the things I bring up as an example, you said, what kinds of things, here's an example, is that the last week it's structured according to chakras. It's 7 weeks. So at the last week when we're at the crown chakra and I'm getting into more spiritual topics, I bring up um the idea of like, how do you see what happens after you die? What's your view on that? And that varies so vastly among person to person. Some have never thought about it. Some I have no idea. How could I know? Some, it ends. That's it. Some have really, really felt into it and they've had clues in their life, like symbology,
Mm,
imagery, or they've been with dying people and they have a really pretty set idea of what happens,
mm.
So here we get to hear all these different concepts and imagery and ideas. And I I just love it. And I think I can kind of like that's part of the excitement around this I share. And that's why I love the death works, because we get to talk about it. We actually get to go there.
I love that. I love that it's a it's a sharing circle, it's a reflection circle. It's, because there's no right answer. There's no sort of like you're right, you're wrong. This is really what happened, We're all still, no, we will never know until we go pass through that threshold ourselves. And so I love that you're creating this space for people to share this, and not in a religious setting, not in a, like a spiritual setting, but it's like you're taking people through, and just through invitation, like let's just share and reflect on how we view things based off of our life experiences. And I find that this also is like allowing people to witness these profound differences in the way that we live and in the way that we perceive life and perceive the universe and all this, it's powerful. It's really powerful.
Yeah. And you know, you brought up the word, well, you said several words that I talk a lot about, unknowns. I mean, we're navigating unknowns. I haven't died. How can I teach someone about this? I don't know.
Yeah, there are
Um,
no experts. I keep on saying there's no
yeah,
experts on death. How can there be, you know?
exactly. Not an expert, just just good at being curious, open, loving during a huge unknown, mysterious time of life. You
Mhm.
know, I think that's really a skill I attempt to share with people, is just being really curious and open um and 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 excited to be at a time when actually someone you love, if you're supporting someone who's dying, is going to know in a second here. So it's kind of exciting. Like they're on their way to, it's like a port. It's definitely a window into another world or a portal to be close to someone when they're dying. And that's where my excitement comes in around it, and joy too, because I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I wanted to bring up like there's there's sometimes in people's minds it's like life and death.
Mhm.
And I just don't see it like that at all.
Like binary.
Yeah, there's birth and death. Those maybe we could say are sort of opposites of but it's just not, yeah, it's not binary. It's not linear. It's just, at least that's been my experience. And again, I haven't died, so I don't know for sure. But what I have felt in the deaths I've been present at is that it's just a change of form. And
Mm.
whatever is life is just changing form and just going on through this cycle, um, this beautiful cycle, and integrating that concept. I At one point I called the course integrating living and dying, but it was just such a mouthful. It's just like a little long, but I do think that's important. Like this is a full cycle, full circle of a life, of a lifetime. And how can keep out one huge part of it, which is death. I mean, we wouldn't be here without the birth. We wouldn't be able to celebrate ourselves as
Mhm.
Ellen, as Laura, if we weren't also going to die. I just
Mhm.
feel like it really
Mhm.
defines like it's a definition of us for this time being.
Yeah.
So to 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 learn about and to kind of wrap your head around is the point of the course. Just kind of wrap your head around it, mostly wrapping your head around the mystery of it, but it's wrapping. I talk a lot about the practical nitty gritty things too that you can do when you're at the bedside of when you find yourself caring for someone. And again, it just kind of it also sparks memories in people when I start
Mm.
talking about the specifics. Like for instance, one time in a class, I was talking about the sponge that on the stick thing that you can use to moisten someone's mouth, and that brought sent one gal participant into a whole memory of her mom's death that had happened about 10 years prior, and grief and just a lot of cathartic release came during the class, and that's very much a part of it because these memories sometimes we've pushed away. Grief has so many layers,
Mm. Hmm.
and so by talking about those practical specific details of what happens to a body and what we do to care for it can bring all that up, and also just helps you. It's like if you have someone dying in your life, it just kind of helps you get wrap your head around the process. Like
Yeah.
we're not exposed to it in our society and our culture, so
Yeah.
we haven't been exposed to it. So we can't expect ourselves to even have any kind of concept or be comfortable around it if we haven't had any kind of exposure to it.
Yeah.
It's really unrealistic to think we're going to be just good at this, you know.
Yeah. If we don't even confront it, if we don't even allow ourselves to look at it, it's very much almost kind of like I'm a meat eater, but I have had friends who have worked in meat departments in a grocery store who've become vegetarian because they see what happens behind the scenes. And so I'm like, it's like sort of an out of sight, out of mind kind of situation. But I feel like that's exactly it, it's like um synthesize, it's not synthesize, that's not the right word, but yeah, it's just ignored because we don't look at it, we don't want to look at it, and so we just sort of relegate it into these hidden places, you know in a locked hospital room, or in it. I think I forgot what, there was a statistic that I had heard about kids in the West not being confronted with death until they're well into their teens, unless for whatever reason there is a loved one, a family member, or somebody who dies, and they end up going to a funeral or memorial service and witnessing, a dead body, or being able to see an actual, dead person, a dead body. And that's like a number that's like, double digits already, usually. Whereas in some of these other countries, you see it as early as, 2, 3, 4. It's just so a part of the culture that it's I really appreciate this person going to India, and how, like, that probably sounds horrific, to be seeing a dead body in the street, or to see multiple dead bodies on a trip. um and yet this is such a key and just inherent part of life that, yeah, it's really interesting, just even as we're talking about it. It's like kind of hitting me how kind of crazy it is that we are not exposed to it the way we need to be, the way it should be, in a sense, with life. It's kind of almost like ignoring life then.
Yeah, and I think that ignoring it and whatever pattern we got into that I called yesterday, we're developmentally disabled culture around death and grief. You
For
know,
sure.
I really like I'm having more sensitivity and empathy around the fact that a lot of people have experienced really horrific deaths because there is that lack of education and preparedness. Even,
Mm.
I mean, a lot of it is in medical situations. Like, if you're in working in a nurse working in an operating room, I heard a nurse say this just the other day, they want to, if they see that someone's dying, they want to get them out of there as soon as possible. So that's, they've got to
The
get them to,
the dying person, you mean?
yeah, they want to get the dying person to somewhere else. I mean,
Wow.
that's not their job, right? Um, that's not their area. And so how, and I'm not judging.
Mhm.
It's just how it has, it's like, what's the chicken or the egg? Like, are we awful at dealing with this because we've had so many horrific situations? What
Yeah.
came first? But it's like, we just aren't, we don't have so many people who are skilled in it because it has been kept and pushed aside. I don't know. It's like there's also differences in personalities as to whether you want to talk about these topics. And some people it's just very dark and that's okay. I've come to realize like not everybody's going to be into this. Maybe if we just have one person in each family who can talk about this, and we're
That's so
good.
true. I know there has to be one person at least that's just like, all about it. It actually makes
Yeah.
me laugh because prior to doing my death doula training last year, I went into it very blind and uneducated. Like I had no idea that like the whole concept of death work or being a death doula was brand new to me. And so when I signed up for this retreat with Alua Arthur's Going with Grace, in my mind I'm like, man, who is drawn to this work? Like I know I like there's a nudge. It's not that I was like excited to be there. It was more like a, damn it, I think I really need to do this. And it was like that kind almost like a little bit of resistance. I definitely felt resistance, a little
Yeah.
bit of fear and trepidation, but also this like deep gut knowing that I have to do this, that there's something here for me. And so this is just a bridge I have to cross. Like this is something that I have to just commit to and experience. And so in my mind, I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but I'm like, am I gonna be in a room full of goth people? Like, is everybody gonna be in black? Like, what am I stepping into? Like, who are these people who are drawn to this work?
Yes.
And the 36, 37 people that were there at the retreat with me were some of the most stylish, colorful lovers of life. Like great senses of
Um,
humor, like just so open and like expressive. And you saw it in the clothes that they wore, like, and I'm somebody who like loves fashion and things like that, but I love seeing how people express themselves, even in the colors that they choose to like, it was just so, so cool. Like it was a room full of joy, actually, like joyful aliveness expression, expressions of aliveness. And it felt so good to be there among this group, and I think their embodiment of aliveness is actually what allows them to be able to speak and study with curiosity death, and this incredible transition, this, transcendent experience that we all go through. Um, there was something that you said a little earlier that I just like wanted to go back to and touch upon when you were talking about the unknown things, like that we're not, there's no experts in death. We can't all know it. And so we're coming into a room and into a space together to share what we think and what we've seen, what we've experienced, and piecing together kind of it's almost like creating a jigsaw puzzle or putting pieces together all together to fill in a little bit of the gaps of this great mystery that we will never ever know until we actually like cross through that threshold. But what I'm realizing also, and I'm just so appreciative of this conversation for my own benefit, because I think the curative nature of medicine, there's always this assumption of knowing, like this is the right path to go, this
mm,
is the diagnosis, this is where you need to go, this is the chemo, this is the medicine, this is the prescription, this is the, this is, there's always this perception or assumption of this is a proven or viable option for care, for a care plan. And that couldn't be further from the truth. There's such a huge unknown, big question mark in that space as well, because they're just using, and when I say they, I mean doctors and the medical staff, whoever's creating this curative plan, it's still just a guess. It's still just a big, huge unknown there as well. And so, I mean, what I'm realizing, I think it's just that we can never know. We can never know how to proceed in anything, even if we want to be going down a curative path, and that's the path that, the dying person and their loved ones have chosen. There's still a huge unknown in that too. And so I guess I don't know that this is coming through me in a sense that I'm like, oh gosh, it just points us back to our disconnection with nature and our disconnection with um, our curiosity, our childlike wonder and our curiosity. And what I so appreciate about the way that you're putting this, that you've put this course together according to the chakra points as well. Like, I'm curious if you can kind of go through what you learn at each of the seven sort of like units, according to the chakra points.
That's great question. Yeah, I would love to. And I just a couple things that you said that like I got so many chills all over my body when you were talking about the brightness of the group that were at this, because that's been my experience too. When I'm in a room with people who are interested in learning more about it, and in my courses, the people that come, they're so joyful. And I think that has to do with like being okay with the full spectrum of things. Like we can only feel as much joy or express exuberance as much as we can allow in that there's sorrow and difficult, tragic experiences happening in life. It's like it's that whole integration. I make whole. It's like a wholehearted, like these are wholehearted people, like they're laughing wholeheartedly. And that was like my experience working in hospice. Like they're really wholeheartedly laughing, these people. And it is and there's that saying, it's not a matter of life or death, but in hospice work, I mean, it is. And yet we gotta
100%.
yeah, we're like finding humor in it. And I've said that to people before, and um, well, you kind of gotta, you gotta lighten it. And I'm like, no, it's more than that. It's not that we're just forcing that. It's like, no, we've allowed more in both sides of the both sides of the spectrum, or the full picture, the full circle. And so we can then express from more, like your one of your sayings on your podcast, live out loud. I was like, yes, that's it.
Yes,
Yes.
totally.
and and then the about the unknowns and the medical model being very like known, and I again, no judgment. It's gotten us so far, but it's more of a masculine,
Hmm.
I can fix this, I've got the answer. And when you're dealing with so many unknowns, even way more unknowns than birth. I mean, birth, we know at least we've got 9 months. And even
Hmm.
still,
Hmm.
it's great to have help because there's so many different things that can happen. And
Right.
yet with death, we have no timeline. So there's even just that basic unknown of time and how it will happen. It creates a lot of fear in people's hearts. I mean, that's what makes it tough. You don't know how it's going to happen.
Hmm.
Um, the end, leaving the body. I don't find as many people who are scared. Some definitely are fearful. And I mean, we all have fears. It's so natural to have fears. Some are very fearful about what happens after, but the majority of the fears I hear are how it's going to happen.
The
To
experience of dying.
Yes, it's
Hmm.
like because there's so many unknowns with that. But there again, to me, that is what you brought up. Nature, Mother Earth is receptive to the mystery. When we can come at it with that kind of, I don't really know, but I know I will be shown, and I know I have something of such wisdom and grace inside of me
Yeah.
that, it I'll know when I need to know, like
Yeah.
what step to take, what
Yeah.
direction to go to. If I go towards the light, if I go towards the sound. I've heard different people give suggestions when you die. I think we'll know if we can maintain that, what you said, that wonder, the awe of the childlike kind of, we'll know. I don't know. Maybe I'm super ultra optimistic, but I just have a sense that that's part of what I want to develop, is like that receptivity
Mm,
to be shown, to listen.
to allow life to happen as it needs to happen and
Yeah,
allow the passage of that life to happen as it needs to happen.
so
Yeah,
easy to say, but
yeah.
that's probably the whole learning.
Right, right. But I love these like it's like a metaphor within a metaphor within it, like this whole dying process. I feel like that's what we're doing in life too, right? Like with every single one of these transitions, these, if you want to call it a small death, I think that sometimes life, the deaths that happen in our lives, like these transitions, can feel really big too, so they're not necessarily small deaths, but they're forms of dying, or they're it's a process, it's a letting go process. And I think it really does speak to how we end how we walk through this. um I'm having a really hard time articulating today. I think it's because there's like so much going on. I'm like super excited, but it's
That's good.
practice. It's practice, for how we end up dying, or leaving this body at the end of the life. But yeah,
Mm, that's yeah. But all the many transitions, man, that we go through before our actual big one.
yeah.
Yeah, this the structure, with the chakras of the course is it's 7 weeks, and I start out just kind of bringing up like real boots on the ground things you can do, like if someone has someone who they're preparing for, an aging parent, a spouse who's ill, or they want to get into the work. This is what you can do. This is what you can encourage your clients to do is so we talk about hospice, what it is, how to research them in your area, find they're not all created equal anymore, so finding good ones. We talk about advanced healthcare directives, designating power of attorneys. I go through those kinds of things. These are things you can do now and wrap your head around, and also start. It's that whole starting the conversation with the person, it's like setting the scene, planting a seed so that they, even if they're like, what? No, I don't want to talk about this. I'm not dying yet. It's like, it's that like you just start it. And then some part of us, I believe we have like this, we do have a very wise part of us, our whatever, our higher self soul is like made aware that, oh, okay, there is that one person in my family or in my life that I could talk about this when I'm ready. And so
Mm,
I encourage people start up the conversation. We talk about like difference between hospice, palliative care, just kind of those knowledge things that we can know now. And then we go into emotions, the emotional aspect of it. A lot of people, if they have grief, someone died, they have regrets. So regrets come up a lot. And just we talk about emotional agility, rather than this rigidity, and letting it flow.
mm,
Um, fears, fears that are coming in, which are so natural. This is
mm,
like people's biggest fear in life. It's where no one's gonna face death without fear. Even watching people who have made their whole life and their career death work, they have fear when they're dying.
yeah, yeah.
It's just part of it. And then week 3, when we're at the solar plexus, I take people through kind of a guided meditation, losing. You've got your 7 activities of daily living, so losing those abilities, just kind of again wrap your head around what it would be like to, or for your loved one to lose those abilities. So kind of just have you contemplate it together in a safe setting with
Mm,
each other. Um, and we also talk about like legacy building. That's a
mm,
big one. Is leaving, like making meaning things with your person or your client. And then week 4 we get into grief, and that comes in pretty strong. And I have a grief community online for people to also, because I found out that we don't have enough time in the class to unpack it. You and I have agreed on this, that grief is
yeah,
pretty freaking huge, and
yeah.
probably a big part of why we aren't facing death like we could. It's because there's all this like layers of grief that we haven't learned to
Mm,
work with.
mm, mm,
Um, so yeah, so week 4 is a lot about that. Week 5, when we get to the throat chakra, it's also still about that, but expressing it with each other. We
mm,
do a little ritual in the course, over you choose someone who has died in your life, and we work with that. We share about that.
Beautiful.
Um, and I do talk about different rituals we can do, because that's such a you and I could talk about that one for an hour, the loss of ritual and how it used to be there. We can learn from our ancestors. It was a very natural part. Um, was gathering with each other, and there was not this message that we now have. It's like, oh, stop crying. It
Right.
was like no, no, together we release, like we get this, we wail, or you
Hmm.
know um yeah. And then week 6 is the third eye, and I bring in topics like holding vigil and actual physical signs of approaching death, so that you kind of have again, just wrapping your head around it, like what happens to the body, and how can you support a person when you're holding vigil at their final moments, when they are actually actively dying. What does actively dying look like?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I bring in psychedelics and their role that is now surfacing in this area. And people often want to know more about that. People are very intrigued, or they've had their own experiences, and I allow time for people to share death experiences they've had, or a lot of times I find that's why people do get suddenly interested in learning more about death and dying, or want to work in the areas, because they've had a death experience in a with psychedelics,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of allowed them to be more open to it. Like, oh, this is very much part of life. I want to learn more. So I
Wow.
bring in that, and the form versus formlessness kind of concepts, and then the final week we talk a bit about near death experiences, because I notice people, not everybody has a positive spiritual experience with near death experiences, but a lot of people experience a lot of hope, and scientific minds have shifted by having their own near death experience, and being open to both the science and the spiritual aspects of it. And so we can learn a lot from near death experiences, people who've gotten just that much closer than we have to it. So I bring in those, and just kind of a sense of our place in the universe, what that is for us, what that means for us, and what I mentioned before, like what do you see happening with the after you die? What is your view of that? I love hearing people. It's like opening this like beautiful kaleidoscope, like when people start talking about what they see happens.
I love this structure. It feels so intentional and um, it starts grounded and it moves into the ethereal, which I really appreciate the full spectrum of that, like the physical body into the spirit body. And there's just like, yeah, I really, really love the way you teach. Do you do this multiple times a year?
I don't have a regular. I did it like 3 or 4 in 2022. I did it once in 2021. I did it maybe 2 times in 2023. So this is my first time 2024. So I don't really have yeah, it's just I really like this time doing it this time of year. The statement you hear is the veil is thinner in the
Hmm.
fall. So
Hmm.
this one's going to be October 1st through November 12th. It's a powerful time to do it. So I guess I pretty much have always done it at least one in the last few years at this time of year. Mhm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My last question is, who is this course for?
Okay. It's anybody who's wanting to get into the work, feeling that kind of like what you did, what you said perfectly, that sort of maybe a trepidation. Why would I want to, I don't know, why would I want to learn about this? But you feel compelled, um, because of also what we've talked about. It just feels like it would be more of a wholehearted way to live, to know a little more about it. And then people who have an aging parent do really well doing this. And people who have maybe an ill or aging spouse or pet, anyone who's recognizing like I could learn some skills to apply around this. It's coming down the pike for me, or maybe for my own. I don't tend to have too many people come who are dying themselves, but I have before.
Interesting.
So it's mostly people who are looking to support
Mm,
a death
mm.
or just know more. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm just really, really, I love this conversation so much. It's so needed, and just really appreciate your perspective, having just this wealth of experience and the wisdom that has come through that experience and walking with so many through this really incredible portal, this really incredible threshold. Um, and I just, the one thing that really brings me so much relief and peace within myself is also witnessing your joy in this space too, and your celebration of those who have crossed over. And just, I, there's something just so, I don't know, it shifts the energy completely when there is this element of celebration in witnessing somebody who has finally been able to let go of their body. And I'm taking that with me,
Mm,
and just, I don't even, I feel like this is wisdom that I can apply not just to physical end of life, but through every single threshold that we cross. Like the
mm.
remembrance of celebration, the remembrance of you did it, and yeah, I don't know. There's just something really magical and powerful about that. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. And nothing's ever easy about it, about these transitions. Like I don't ever want to say it's not. I'm not denying that. But it is so, there is always a rebirth, something that comes after. And as you were just saying, talking, bringing up celebration and how that brings, you appreciate that, and I appreciate that you appreciate that about me. Um, my one of my mentors, one of my teachers, the second person I was with when he died, who I was hired to care for, my 88-year-old neighbor Ed Smith, was like coming in really strong, smiling really big, like yeah. he he was like a profound, peaceful, beautiful departure. He was such a courageous departure that I got to witness, and he's, those are the people that are helping me with this work. Those are the energies that help and um touch people, and I'm so glad to be getting to know you and having this conversation. It's really been, it's makes me feel alive.
Likewise, likewise. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all, so much for tuning into this episode and this conversation with Laura. I hope you found it just as nourishing as I did. And as an extra special gift, she's giving mom listeners 10% off her course, which starts October 1st, 2024. So the full price of the course is $495 USD. With the 10% off, it is $445 USD. And you'll find in the show notes a link directly to her Venmo. You can go ahead and Venmo her the 445 and just include mom as well as your email in the description. She'll go ahead and email you the course materials once she receives your payment. Thank you so much again. And if you found this episode really inspiring, I invite you to take a moment just to rate and review us, as it really helps us to share our work and to continue to spread the love. Thanks so much, and see you at the next episode.